All right.
What's up, everyone? It's Commander Shipp and Sangdi Chen coming here to you, not live, but doing a little pre game of the year chat before next week's Game Awards, hosted by the lovely Jeff Keeley. And man, it's been a while since we've got to chat some video games.
Yeah, it's been a while, Kenny, but yay, we're back. And can't believe it's December again, and it's the Game Awards again. I don't know about the rest of folks, but this year has zipped by for me in a slightly terrifying way. But hey, we always have these sort of like touchstones in the industry, like these awards, and it's a good time to pause, reflect, think about some of the things that have been happening the past year. And boy, has it been quite a banner year.
Yeah, we've had for folks who have been keeping track of what's been going on in the world. There's been a lot of AI in the news. Uh, First, how that's affecting
A lot of bad
gaming.
stuff in the news in general. Tons of layoffs in the tech industry at large, not just in gaming. It's been tumultuous. It's been really, really tumultuous. And yet, in spite of that, I think we have some really cool games to talk about today, and it really says something about where the innovation, quote unquote, is coming from these days. But we'll get to that in a little bit, I think.
For folks who are not aware, our Game of the Year nominees, again, from the Game Awards, but these are kind of collectively also the same kind of awards across the different nominees throughout the year. We have Claire Obscure Expedition 33 from Sandfall Interactive, Death Stranding 2 On the Beach from Kojima Productions and Sony, Donkey Kong Bonanza from Nintendo, Hades 2 from Supergiant Games, Hollow Knight Silksong from Team Cherry, and lastly, but not least, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 Warhouse Studios Deep Silver. Just a kind of quick down and dirty. Actually, we didn't talk about this in the pre-chat. Is there any game that you felt should have been on that list that you think didn't?
Oh God. I think I might be the wrong person to ask that question, actually, given that a lot of my media spread these days to go beyond just video games, so I probably don't get quite as deep on titles as I think some folks do. But that's a fair question, though, and I think something for our listeners to think about as well.
Yeah, definitely. As you're watching this, if you want to throw this in the comments as you're watching, let us know. And I will ask that question again for Steve, because I know out of the team, Steve and Jerry have been able to play way more games this year, but we definitely kind of want to get a pre-chat kind of going before next week's awards. So yeah, I know Steve probably is like ready to go. It's like, it's like Binding of Isaac again. It's like, Steve, that came out years
so
ago.
long ago. Yes, no, Undertale. It should have won. You're correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, okay. So, what has been your favorite out of this list?
Oh gosh. Okay. So a favorite out of this list, and listeners, this is with the preface, of course, that as I just mentioned, I have not touched all of these games. I'm aware of all of them to one extent or another. But of the ones that I personally played, which are Claire Obscura, Expedition 33, Hades 2, and like a touch of Silksong. I tried it. I'll be honest with you. I watched the first one, as in I watched somebody else play through it. So if I'm being completely honest, I don't think I was ever. But I had to try, right? Like the hype was crazy, and like everyone was so excited. It's been in production for a very, very long time, and we kind of know why. I mean, for me personally, I think Claire Obscura really just for a team of that size, which Kenny, correct me if I'm wrong, it was 30, 35 people. I think that's it, which is madness.
30 or 35 on the core team.
Yeah.
And there were definitely tasks that were divvied out to some smaller teams as well. So
smaller teams, contractors, the sort of hodgepodge way that project management gets done these days. Anyways, I think Sandfall Interactive and Kepler Interactive and Supergiant Games are sort of all, I think, roughly equivalent sizes. And it is truly remarkable, I think, what the team has been able to do there. Like, I think we will probably talk about this deeper into the show as well, but there's really something to be said for the teams who work efficiently enough that they can over-index this hard on things like design, art direction, the 3D modeling. Pardon the language. That you might have to bleep that part out. But pardon my language. But the game was beautiful. The game was absolutely beautiful, and in a way that I think some of us have been craving for years and years.
Sorry, that was more of being excited, but usually use whatever language you want to use.
Cool.
Yeah.
What about you, Kenny?
Okay, so my game of the year pick is going to be different. I know we'll talk about that in a second. But my favorite out of the list has actually been Donkey Kong Bonanza. So I'll go ahead and tease it. It's going to be different from my pick of the year. But everyone kept saying it was good. And I'm like, yeah, but Donkey Kong games recently, like 64 was great. I had a great time playing back in 64. But as far as like a core 3D adventure Donkey Kong game, it had been a minute since we had one that was really fresh.
A long time. I think 11 years, if I read correctly, and just sort of most of my pre-show reading. It's been a really long time, actually. Yeah. And Nintendo's
even wasn't even out of kind of a reskin of Country.
Something like that. There was, yes. If there's not a reskin, there's certainly a lot of sort of recycling of certain things, which I think. I don't know. It's a technique that Nintendo sometimes relied upon in, I don't want to call it their off years. That feels really rude, right? But the years in which they choose a more contracted version of the game, right? Like if we compare, for example, like Mario Kart 8 to the newest one, right? Which there's a different scale.
There's a very clear.
So it's interesting. Like they take a very interesting strategy of when to truly invest in a game and when they know they want to release something and it's probably part of the business plan or the strategy for the next 3 to 5 years or whatever it is, and they'll still follow through on that anyways, right? And they'll still deliver a quality enough product. But no, it really seems like, at least based on a lot of the reactions I saw, they've really knocked it out of the park with Donkey Kong Bonanza.
Because a lot of reactions were like, "What do you mean we can destroy everything?
Anything?"
It's sort of like a lot of coders are like, back to like Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, like, this shouldn't work on that hardware. How did you make all these links and connections and the thing not crash? Like, that's insane. So, and even though the Switch 2 is more powerful than the original Switch, it's not a powerhouse, and by any means, it's a great console, but it's not a powerhouse by any means. And you have these environments that are, again, there is obviously some structures that you just, you got to be able to hold the environment together. So, not everything is destructible, but
But for what I've seen in the kind of gameplay snippets I've seen, it's a lot. It is a lot, and I think players will most likely. They'll be having too much fun exploring for a long while before they notice anything where they're like, oh yeah, I've reached a limit of what this like mechanic can actually do. Which, speaking of, I think it's fair to say that across at least the games I've touched, but I think it might be true of the other ones as well based on what I've read, is each of the titles, I think, that is Game of the Year nominee this year did something interesting in terms of both the game mechanically and the game story-wise. We can maybe tackle that a little bit later, but I think each of them did something special, and there's a reason why they sort of caught the popular imagination even beyond the core gaming community in some cases.
Well, I mean, if you want to, go ahead. And, yeah, I think that might be a good segue.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'll start with what I've observed, I think, in the games that I've touched the most, right? So Clair Obscur and Hades 2. In the former, I think, a lot of folks have already talked about this, the fact that they've so beautifully captured that JRPG experience with strong character writing, beautiful worlds, but also a method of dealing with things without resorting to open map exploration by it actually still is, once again, that more segmented experience where you are more being guided through the story and the environments. Even though I'm not gonna lie, that overworld map, gorgeous, novel. I don't think I've seen anything like it at least in the 20 some odd years that I've been gaming. I'm playing a lot of those kinds of games.
It's a really good effect. And also, you can kind of quickly figure out, this is where I need to go. That area is probably going to kill me.
Yep.
Kind of quickly, like, all right, that's a harder, or you kind of figure out what the challenge levels and stuff are at. And really quickly, you're like,
yeah.
Oh, that thing in the distance? Maybe don't.
Maybe don't
mess with it.
Maybe yeah, and again, this is what I think is so interesting about developers and studios like Sandfall Interactive and Supergiant Games is they're a small team. So again, like I said, where they choose to be able to over-index on things. In Clair Obscur, I think what for me was the real hook of it was the fact that that quick time mechanic in the combat, because there's just going to be a lot of combat. That's kind of how these games work. So your core gameplay loop in the battles is super important to get that absolute right. And for me, what was so unique and interesting is quick time events can seem, quite frankly, really cheap sometimes. I think that in the sort of modern development world, like we see it a lot associated with certain kinds of story moments where, you have to hit X to save this person, and it's a little overdone, isn't it? Like it's like there are other places mechanically where that kind of feature would make more sense. And the way Clair Obscur folded it into the core battle mechanic, as a way of helping you navigate even incredibly challenging boss fights. By the end of the game, you are dodging or parrying 15 to 20 times in some cases, which is, you would never think at the beginning of the game that you would end up doing that. But the way they built it is such a way that it gives the players a lot of opportunities to try the mechanic over and over again. You do kind of get a little punished for it if you don't get it exactly right. And so each time it happens, there's weight and stakes to it that you would not think would be true for a mechanic like that happens so frequently. But somehow they managed to fold it into the gameplay loop in a way that feels incredibly satisfying when you get it right, and rewards you the better you get at it. At the same time, it also has an effect on the narrative too, where you kind of feel you're growing with the characters as they're moving through the story, right? By the time you reach the end of the game, there is that investment not only in their story, but you have mechanically grown with them. And because each of the characters are their own unique system that you have to learn and build, which, by the way, that's also genius and a little frightening how they managed to pull it off, because every single character is so different. You could build an entire game around each of the characters,
just one of those
systems and setups. Exactly. And that's kind of crazy that they decided to fit so many into the game. So for me, there's so many different elements of this where like they chose to really look at some interesting, innovative ways of doing things that like give us flavors of like the history of the genre, but also still brings us something really new and fresh. And that is increasingly hard to find these days.
Yeah, I have found it as much as it's given a heart, appreciation to JRPGs. I also think it's making a subtle jab, and I know the Dark Souls fans will probably be mad at me, but I think it's giving a little jab of the, hey, these fights can be difficult, but just start back from right here. And I'm not saying other games haven't done that, but just for it to be a still rich and complex JRPG, which that can be a headache in itself, but they don't.
Absolutely.
There's some things I love about Final Fantasy, but sometimes they go overboard as far as the amount of things you could potentially do in it, but what you may not be able to do if you miss a thing. I never felt like that in Clair Obscur. I felt like if my skill was good enough and I continue to level my character, I could find a way for certain situations. Not the shoot, you didn't collect this piece for ultimate weapon, so that fight later it's gonna be difficult.
I'm having horrifying flashbacks to Final Fantasy X, and I'm not okay. Full confession time, Kenny. My boyfriend and I, we used a cheat disk. We couldn't. There were some of those like Lulu's. We couldn't. I was like, what do you mean dodge lightning 200 times in a row? Fuck you. Like, it wasn't gonna happen, and it felt punishing for no reason. Like, sure, the completionists are going to do it, but it's an interesting choice to build that sort of like friction into the gaming system. And I think a lot of the representatives in the Game of Year nominees this year went out of their way to kind of. There's a lot of debate in the community about like degree of ease, right? In the games that are released today. And on the one hand, you sort of have folks for whom difficulty is kind of part and parcel of the proposition, right? Like you want to play games to get better at them. You want to be pushed by those systems, and you want to suffer a little bit for it, honestly. And on the other side, you have folks who say, well, I want to enjoy games for what they are, and I want them to be accessible to me. And I don't want that to be totally, keyed into my skill level and desire and motivation to get better and better mechanically at these games. Now, of course, the gaming world is wide, and everyone can have a game represented in this. But I think sometimes, and this is to your point, what I think is sort of a little bit of the tragedy and hindsight of the Souls-like genre, is it was revolutionary that they were as hard as they were, and that really like gave players a very serious challenge to live up to. And for the folks who did it, it was monumental, felt amazing, honestly.
Yeah.
But what it did afterwards is started to narrow the definition of how games can choose to deal with difficulty, right? And this is something that I think I posted about this on Blue Sky the other day. Hades 2, the God mode, they added a little tweak to it that they didn't have in the first game. In the first game, you toggled God mode on, and you would start with, I think it was either a 10 or 15% damage mitigation that would go up by 2% every time you failed to run, basically. In Hades 2, it still functions exactly the same, except they've given us now an additional slider to toggle how much damage resistance the mode tops out at, which, by the way, my first immediate thought was, hang on a second, so if I wanted to keep getting better at the game mechanically, I can slowly dial the damage resistance down and down and down and down until it's 0, right? That means I'm playing the game at its full difficulty, and I will have trained myself there. That feature was already, just beyond it being an incredible accessibility feature as design, from a design standpoint, it also kind of gave you an extra mechanical bit of flavor to the gameplay, because you're playing a god or goddess in the game, in the case of Hades 2, who is growing stronger and stronger as time goes on, right? It fits narratively with what you would expect to happen, and can really, I think, in a different way, in the opposite direction of a Souls-like game, you still get that investment in the character getting stronger, and you getting sort of the satisfying victories that come with it, and it still propels the game forward, right? Like, that was one of the real innovations, I think, that Supergiant did with the first Hades, and it's interesting to see them kind of evolve from that. And it's given us, I think, a different sort of conversation about difficulty in games, and I'm glad we're having it, because Souls-like aren't the only way to do difficulty as a primary or a primary challenge or function in gameplay. There are so many other ways. Let's look at those other ways and see what else is interesting that's out there.
Because it's totally fine for that to be a trend that comes along.
Absolutely.
It's just the way sometimes how dominant it could be is where that was a little frustrating. Or even just in the conversation of difficulty.
Yes.
Like,
it begins to dominate the conversation, right? And I think when it starts to crowd out new ideas and reduces the diversity of what we have to engage with out there, it can have the effect of sort of putting on blinders a little bit, right? And like, I don't blame anybody for getting really swept up and wanting and feeling really impassioned about this. That's great. I think that's what any of us would want out of games, is the stuff that really captures our imagination and our time and energy, right? But there's always going to be something different. And if we get too stuck with what we think is the best thing in that moment, then we're going to lose out on really interesting stuff in the future. And that just leaves me feeling really grateful that all of these developers have continued to push their craft at a time when the world kind of doesn't necessarily incentivize them to do so, except for their own satisfaction, because they know this is something they can do. And I'm so glad, honestly.
Yeah. So quick, what have you not been able to play on the list?
So I think on this list, I have not touched Death Stranding yet, because I do want to play the series proper down. I actually didn't know that there was a second game in production, but what I've known is this game has, I mean, it's a Kojima game. It's weird, right? Like, weird probably doesn't even begin to totally cover it, honestly. But the first game,
2 definitely doubles down.
He does nothing but double down, and thank God for that, honestly, right? Like, it's, again, kind of going back to the point I just made, we need people who are willing to take these risks, right? And it may be there's no guarantee that it would work out financially, that it would work out in terms of the community really picking up on it. But yeah, so I'm waiting still to like play it through properly, and I think we actually talked about this a couple years ago, whenever we did our last chat for Game of the Year stuff, when we were talking about the ways that like the gaming industry is starting to lean on casting the way that Hollywood does, right? And Death Stranding to me has always been one of the better examples of where Kojima knows how to use these performers, and he was almost like film director like in the way that he kind of like created this incredible narrative and had this amazing performance like acted out for us in a very theatrical way, honestly.
Yeah. And Stranding, I sometimes, if I'm like, so I haven't been able to finish. So real quick, I was able to play a little bit of Stranding, haven't been able to finish it. I've seen clips, so it got me into the rabbit hole watching the cutscenes. I spoiled the movie, or sorry, spoiled the game for myself.
No.
But that does back up what you're saying, that how cinematic all of them are. And then the last I really just haven't been able to dive into is Silk Song and Deliverance. But Kojima is arguably the best cutscene director that we have. Like, I think it sounds like he's number one. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't have a ton of people I want to put in that same category.
Exactly. Like, I think there are a few game directors out there that could be called auteurs the way that we call them filmmakers auteurs. It's a very peculiar sort of title, right? Because the thing is, I think his games aren't for everybody, just like how auteur filmmakers, a lot of their films aren't necessarily for everybody, but there is something in that niche they do so incredibly well. And they push at the boundaries of these concepts. They push at the boundaries of what we are comfortable or uncomfortable with, in these areas. And yeah, I'm just glad he spun off and started doing his own thing and was less answerable to sort of like studio demands and their own goals and targets and stuff like that. And granted, of course, he was still able to do amazing things within those frameworks. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he would be where he's at if he wasn't able to navigate those studio systems incredibly well. But to see him really flex his creativity in this way, and this,
it's massive.
It's massive. It's really incredible. Like, what a privilege it is in our lifetimes to witness someone like this work.
I mean, even just let's think about the premise. I'm going to set a delivery man to walk across an American wasteland. And like, so he's gonna have a car and he's gonna have a gun. And he's gonna start shooting people, right? Like,
no, he's walking. He's walking. With boxes on his back.
He's got boxes. He's got a baby. He's got a ladder. Like, if you make that the pitch, you're like,
are you crazy? I could hear the record scratch if he ever tried to pitch this to the executives of a studio,
exactly.
Just, sir, you want to try and sell a delivery simulator is what you're calling is what you're trying to dress this game up as. And it sounds crazy actually, but everything that I've heard in terms of how he could turn something so mundane in the gameplay of it into something that became actually emotionally connected for people is really remarkable, honestly, right? Because I think, if I understand correctly, for a lot of that first game, Sam is kind of on his own, right?
Yes, for sure.
And a lot of him very solitary, trucking through the world. It's a little bit Outcast, or not Outcast, sorry. Oh my god, that's so embarrassing.
Oh, you're good.
The Tom Hanks movie, Castaway.
Castaway,
right?
yeah.
Castaway or The Martian, where you have just one character on his own, sort of like man against the world sort of thing, right? But for that story to also be about human infrastructure and society in a hidden sort of way, I think is like super, super cool, honestly.
Yeah. I'm trying to reconnect everyone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I would say on this list, the game that I know the least about is probably Kingdom Come Deliverance. I think that one I've only sort of seen at the sort of peripheries of my life, which tells me that like probably the segment of gamers that it really landed with are still in that sort of like historical, strategic, maybe historical fantasy type genres. But I've heard that it's been done incredibly well. And again, like some of the other games in this list, they've over-indexed design-wise on some really interesting things, right? From what I understand, tons of work put into custom stories for each, kind of job title that you can take on in the game, like blacksmith or something else like that. And really giving the game a lot of responsiveness to player choice. I think that's something else that we've seen in a lot of cases with a lot of these games, that some of the AAA studios with their kind of known franchises, it's hard to say how much they're really able to, like, beyond the sort of core gameplay. Okay, you've got a new Madden game, you kind of know what the core gameplay is going to be already. You've been knowing for like a decade, 15 years, whatever it is, right? And so, like, in a situation like that, you're sort of a little bit constrained by the existing structure of the game and the franchise. And I'm sure you could innovate on top of that. And in some cases, I think certain studios have chosen to do so. I know that the Battlefield series has generally always done very well because they've always managed to find ways to update the game or make it more engaging or add other features to really add a diversity of gameplay and narrative to it. But if you don't do that and you just sort of assume that your series, your franchise is always going to do well because you have that sort of existing player base, it leaves gaps for games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 to step in and say, I'm going to provide a different experience that's going to be even more responsive to what players do. We're giving them real agency and choice at a time when seemingly a lot of the industry is thinking about that
away.
Right.
And to be fair, even like Call of Duty and Battlefield have fallen prey to that. Like Battlefield 6 is probably the best example of finally kind of getting out of that rut. Even though there's a lot of familiarity and similar vibes from the previous Battlefield, like they're really listening to what the players have wanted to try to get some fresh ideas back into the mix, really kind of shaking it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If you are a fan of, I have played the original Deliverance, but I haven't played Deliverance 2. So I apologize if you're a fan of that and you're like, what? We weren't able to talk. It's like, folks, we do have day jobs. And other like, hey, if we want to do this full time, that's another conversation. Maybe y'all support us.
Maybe to do it full time. I'd be happy to. Well, we do this for the love of it, though. There's, I suppose you could say, not a ton of money out there for that.
But yeah, we're definitely talking about trying to be respectful to ones that we're talking about that we've had some hands on.
Definitely.
Yeah. Cool. I will say, out of the ones that I have played, my pick. So people probably could already guess that it's Claire Obscure. I'm not saying that like it's got emotional beads throughout the entire game, but the first, and when I say 10-ish minutes, I just mean in the sense of like the intro, getting down to the dock. I just like it's
what happens after that.
Just right, the other beach. For if you haven't played it, we won't say
yeah, we won't go there. Sorry, that is truly worth experiencing for yourself if you haven't, and also I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you really don't want anyone spoiling that for you. Like, don't even watch cutscenes of that.
Don't.
This is definitely a game where
see it live with your own eyes.
The hook, kind of in the Kojima way. When someone told me the hook, there's these people on an island, and the years are counting down, and everyone who's older than that year, like you're like, what? And it's like, and it plays like an old school JRPG, but sort of, and you're like,
but it's very French Belle Epoque, you know. It's referencing a totally different aesthetic period, you know, which is a different sort of like, you know, it's one of those games where you play and you feel like, oh shit, why hasn't someone done this already? Well, they did, obviously.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
when you find that formula, it feels obvious in hindsight, but it wasn't obvious clearly until somebody did it, and they did.
Yeah. I sat down with it, and I'm like, I don't know what else is going to happen, but this is amazing. Like and they didn't fumble it after that. And I'm not saying they could have fumbled it and still been okay, but it's one of those things. Like the beginning is so assuring that I'm like, you're going to knock the rest. I don't get that feeling very much from a lot of games.
No,
you just did this setup so well that everything else that came afterwards was just like, and just hit that bead and hit that bead and hit that bead, and you're gonna be fine. Yes. And then you find out there's more layers in there that you can have some fun with, or the references. You know, did you ever play Final Fantasy VIII?
No, to my infinite shame, I think at this point I played 10, 10-2, a little bit of 14, but the sort of classics like 7 and 8, I'm still sort of are on my to-play list. My infinite shame, but I'll rectify that someday.
There's a card game in Final Fantasy VIII called Triple Triad, and they don't have a card game in this game, but some of the Gestrels are playing Double Dyad. It's kind of like a reference to
Amazing.
that.
Oh my God. Wow. Okay. I
I
remember seeing
lost
this in the game. I
my
was like, I don't think I
shit.
know this reference, but this seems like something, and I will find out at some point. I did today. What that actually is. Oh, that's beautiful. We love these sort of tributes, don't we? Like developers who know, like we know whose shoulders we're standing upon, and that kind of acknowledgement is so important, right? That kind of creative lineage and provenance, if you will.
Yeah, that's what I mean by like a rich game. They're
Yeah.
like they didn't. You don't have to add the card game. Sometimes
You
just little references
don't.
like
You
that
don't.
is.
Yeah. There's a really great video that I saw on YouTube, I think probably a month or two ago, from a creator named Rasputin who does a variety of content about video games. And he made a video about unnecessary features or pointless features, I think he called it basically. And in Hades too, there's a couple examples, including the sort of gesture you can do as Melinoi, where you can bow to the various characters and NPCs who are in your environment with you. It has no connection to any other bits of gameplay at all. It has nothing to do with you actually doing either your runs up to Mount Olympus or down to Tartarus. It's just flavor. That is all it is. But it's such an interesting idea to put that in there. And certainly the way I played Melinoi, I'm like, yeah, she would absolutely bow to everyone that she respects. Maybe even to the people she doesn't respect so much, but she feels like she has an obligation to. It's another way of expressing characterization without leaning on the more overt portions of the story, right? And I think, again, I keep saying this because it's true of all these games, they all do that to one extent or another, right? Where there is flavor and there's additional kind of narrative peaks, basically, that didn't have to build in that way, or even references to show where it belongs and the sort of grand stream of this genre that really gives it so much depth. On top of, by the way, this is what I think Claire Obscura just knocked it out of the park on, the way they managed to establish emotional stakes in the introduction of the game by introducing two incredibly interesting premises, right? Which is
Right.
the ever decreasing age of the population and this band of heroes who are trying desperately to save their world, even as they know the prior
Expeditions have failed.
60 some odd expeditions have failed, right? That gives immediate stake. It gives you this immediate sense of the true desperation of a people like this. And I won't lie to you, I think given circumstances in our world being what it is, that I'm sure has been a little bit of something that maybe got to all of us when it comes to what the emotional connection of like the, oh God, it does feel desperate. What do you do in desperate circumstances? How do you fight on when you suffered and seen horrific things, but have to do it anyways?
You gotta say for those who come after.
For those who come after. I'm gonna try really hard not to tear up because, oh God, okay. I'm good? We're good? Yep.
And wisely, like a JRPG, it knows when to give you a breath. Because, oh my God, I thought the Gestrel village, I was like, this seems silly, but then in hindsight, I was like, and I did enjoy them. I did, like, so I want to be clear, like, legitimately enjoyed them. But part of me is now thinking back on it, I was like, I don't know if we could have taken another segment as heavy as it had been up until that point if you didn't drop in some levity. Like we gotta give them a breath somewhere. And then now, for folks who have played it, you know that story arc is getting ready to start right after the Gestrel village. Again, so I won't say any more there. But
quite
it definitely
quite a roller coaster.
Yeah. But I'm trying to imagine, like, oh, take the village out and have to run right into that.
Yeah. That's where, like, if they had chosen to do that, which would have been a valid choice, even though I think it would have actually been the inferior one in the grand scheme of things. I mean, that's where the games just border on misery porn, right? Like, we have misery porn films, we have misery porn books, and we have misery porn video games. And they can be incredibly cathartic, don't get me wrong. All of these games and these works have places in our world where sometimes you just need that outlet for everything that feels as horrific as that does. And sometimes you need to be there for a little while. Let yourself feel those feelings before you can move on and keep walking with your day. But we can't consume those all the time, right? It's actually probably kind of emotionally unhealthy to consume misery porn all the time because Right, because it starts to distort how you see the world and how you move through the world. I'm trying not to get too preachy here, sorry. But it's kind of important to have that kind of variation. I think it's really great that, this is true, I think, for Hades 2 as well, as I found it anyways, is they still managed to build in moments that not only were moments of levity for the player, but also humanize the characters too, and made sure that it wasn't just about their suffering, right? I think that is something, this is a little bit of a modern sin, I think, in a variety of media, that we equate a character suffering with the character gaining meaning somehow, right? And the good writers in the world find a way to give the characters the agency to find the meaning even through the struggle and outside of the struggle too. The less developed writers, I will just say, don't do that. They kind of assume the suffering itself might confer that meaning or sense of identity to begin with, right? And that, I think, is ultimately too flat of a way to look at a diverse world in which there's a wide spectrum and rainbow of emotions and experiences to be had. And that richness is part of what makes life worth living, right? And our media should really reflect that in a lot of ways.
Yeah. If you just kind of want to stamp a AAA game and get it out the door, you can do that. If you want to create a story that's going to stand the test of time and have people want to kind of go back through and dive into it over and over again, then yeah, you need that. You need that complexity.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Put some thought into your characters.
Put some thought into your characters.
Like what's going to happen when you present them with this situation, or how many times. And this, from the conversations I've had, have you already got levels and stuff designed out? And you're like, what do you mean you're putting a story on afterwards? What?
Beautiful level design and beautiful mechanics mean nothing if you can't convince your players to give a shit about what they're doing. Right? Like, we have simulation games, and I love those genres too. Don't get me wrong, for our neurospicy folks out there, of which I might or may not be one. But regardless, we have those simulation games, and those are interesting and mechanically in a different way. But when it comes to these kinds of games that are both narrative driven and mechanically driven, there is a way to kind of really, really interlink them and mesh them in a way where they grow and feed on each other and really gives you this kind of holistic experience that can be kind of very totalizing in a way, really. That's what's so unique about video games that we just don't get with other genres. The closest, I think, where there is that deep sense of interaction between you and the medium is reading, right? Where that truly involves our full imagination and kind of our senses. Video games do that in a different way. And why not make full use of that suite, right?
Yes. I don't want to assume, but is Clair Obscur also your pick, or do you have a different?
I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, I think it has to be Clair Obscur for me, just for how many things they got right. There's a part of me I know that wants to argue for Hades 2, but it's in this kind of interesting place where I think every time a studio, I think, chooses to do a sequel, and it was particularly unusual for Supergiant Games. They've been very clear throughout the history of their work that they don't want to just repeat what's successful. They want to keep pushing at their own boundaries and see what else they can make. And I think Hades 2 represents for them the first time they've bumped into an edge and thought, oh wait, there actually might be more beyond this limit in this direction. Maybe let's see what happens if we actually choose to stick with it for once. And in, I think, pretty much most conceivable metrics, they succeeded. Hades 2 is a larger game. It's more mechanically complicated. It's a wider cast of characters. And it's still a contrasting, but in my opinion, very compelling story. And one that kind of tells an inverse of the character journey that Zacharias goes on in the first game, right? Spoiler warnings for Hades 2? Before I go on, just for listeners who really give a shit about that, maybe wait until, I'll give some sort of a cue so that you know what timestamp to come back at, basically. Yeah. But the difference with Hades 2 is Melinoe's journey is preset for her in a lot of ways. She was raised from birth hearing death to Kronos, right? And that has been her entire life's journey, is to kill the Titan of Time and get her family back and get the world back. And for her to arrive at the end of that journey, because the true ending came out with 1.0, for her to get to the end of that journey and to ultimately defy her upbringing and what she's been told her goal is her entire life, is the opposite, but such a perfect complement to the first game, right? The first game, you're already rebelling. You're already like, fuck this, fuck you, dad. I'm going to get out of here and see what's going on out there. And in the process, discover this massive family secret and then bring your family back together. Hades 2 is also a story of bringing one's family back together, but in recognizing that death and violence is not the only way, that even in those who are the most hurt and who are hurting us, not that it can be excused, it should not be, atonement and penance is really important, but that even in those darker moments, it is not impossible if we're willing to reach out when we see a possibility to do so, right? And it is that it takes a risk to do it. And indeed, like this sort of contrast in values between Zagreus and Malinois make, I think, this pair of games a really interesting sort of commentary on what it means to try and solve for problems in the world, knowing that there are multiple ways to do it and some are more expedient than others, but come with hidden consequences and costs that we're not aware of sometimes until we've gone through with the deed to begin with. In spite of that, though, I think I've seen some, if not criticism, certainly whisperings kind of around in different circles that, you know, to them that, you know, Hades 2 is sort of either an inferior story to the first one, which, and I can't say I really agree with that. But if what folks were looking for was for Supergiant to somehow both innovate again and also push at this kind of same direction that they found with Hades, that was never going to happen, right? And so in that particular way, I think because I'm so drawn to what was so novel and good about Clair Obscur, that's why it has to be my game of the year, I think. Sorry for that incredibly lengthy explanation. By the way, we're at, I don't know what the timestamp is, but you can come back now. Spoilers over.
Cool.
I'm sure Clair Obscur is not the reason that I got sort of like this like Frenchish bob earlier this year. Absolutely not.
Oh.
Not related.
Uh-huh. Cool. Are there any like kind of last wrapping thoughts? Because I know when we stream, we're gonna kind of try to get into some other game topics from the year as well. I guess if there's anything else you kind of want like a button or.
I don't think so. I think this coming year will be very interesting. There are a number of major titles that have been in the works for a really long time, right? I think we heard Todd Howard at Bethesda say that they would not be starting work on the next Fallout game until Elder Scrolls 6 is out. And yet at the same time, I think there's also whispers that they're considering doing a remaster or remake even of Fallout New Vegas.
Oh yeah, I actually would hopefully, you know, like a remaster, get one that you don't have to patch all the bugs out of it for the 18th
Oh God,
time.
I mean, it was, Kenny, tell me it wasn't worth it though. Tell me in your heart of hearts that New Vegas is not your favorite Fallout game as it is my favorite Fallout game.
Some of the bugs are kind of awesome.
Okay, they are pretty awesome. You're not wrong about that. You're not wrong about that. Yeah. But no, I think
GTA 6 delayed again.
Again, right? I think. I don't know if it's the second or third time they pushed back the release date already. I know it's happened a number of times, and I will be honest, I've been totally keeping up to date with why they've been delayed. If it's one of those situations where like we just need more time to polish the game. Hopefully it doesn't turn out to be a Cyberpunk 2077 situation where the game is unplayable for some people on launch, and it takes them 2+ years to fix it and get it to the state that it was probably intended to be in. But such are the sort of
I doubt Rockstar would do that.
Of timelines. I hope not.
And if they're giving them more time, I'm hoping that means that they're not crunching them. Just because
the perennial problem. The perennial problem. Yeah. So
and I assume there's going to be an amount of that. But if this means that they're being less impacted on, then I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm sure there's always going to be a minority of folks who are very vocal about the fact that they want games on the timelines they're promised. I think a lot of us would prefer our games not to be developed with practically what feels like slave labor in some cases, right? Like it's sorry, that's truly going a little too far. I should not call it that. But it's not great working conditions, right? It's not great working conditions. And I think it's pretty well-known fact folks who are under that level of stress are not going to produce the same kind of quality of work, And so I think just in an enlightened self-interest way, we should, hope for better treatment of developers and the folks really working on this stuff, because they'll mean better work and better outcomes for everybody. I know, wild. It's a revolutionary, crazy thought, man.
Not allowed.
I think not allowed. Don't even think about it. Final thing I will just say is I think it will be very interesting for us to really look at over the coming year what happens with AI in this industry, right? Like I keep coming back to simply because I touched on it professionally myself, but in an industry where I think AI use is as fraught as it is in the gaming world, I would be curious to see where are the areas where it makes sense for studios to be using this technology so that their people can be focused on the more interesting creative parts of the work versus where it starts to undercut the industry, right? And undercut actually what is good about games that people actually want, right? We don't want this to be another situation with microtransactions and loot boxes. Well, we don't know. We won't know until we actually get there and see who gets it right and who gets it really wrong.
I mean, I already suspect that bigger studios are going to fail on this pretty hard.
Yeah.
Because they already aren't creating great stories.
Right.
So they're going to cut out the people who could make the good stories and then play like, because I could go on a rant. It's driving me nuts that we're trying to use AI to replace the creative instead of using it as a tool to help the creative.
Yeah.
Like that's not what we don't need AI to be creative for us.
No, we don't.
Use it as a tool to make our creations. But
exactly. AI can be creative because we're creative, right? That is truly what it is attempting to replicate and simply won't, right? Like the crazy thing is I think if you listen to at least the people who are more in the know in the industry, they're all very clear. Don't use this stuff for creative outputs. There is already significant bias among consumers towards use of this technology for kind of inappropriate use cases, let's say. And creative is actually one of those things. Like they want to know that the work they're consuming has been made by another human being, because otherwise, like a lot of the stuff that we've seen, like sure, there have been a couple interesting works, but in a lot of cases, it's not actually that, some executive, some studio managed to prompt something interesting out of an LLM chatbot. In a lot of cases, it was creatives augmenting themselves with this technology. They already had the creative vision. The AI wasn't a part of the vision. The AI was part of them speeding up the process of getting to their vision faster, right? And so to your point, Kenny, about who's going to do it right and who's going to do it wrong, the people who think that AI is going to allow them the creative shortcut have already failed, basically.
Yes. I'm not saying you won't produce something.
They'll produce something.
It'll be an abhorrent abomination that's unfit to be loaded into a game cartridge.
We'll see what happens.
I know Cherry wants to really talk about this, so I won't jump into the Steam box.
Ooh, I'm gonna let Jerry take that one. That could be a very interesting shift. A very interesting shift in the market if Valve pulls it off.
If you have reduced the costs for the and the indie studios can already release on Steam and be successful there, but if you have something that really goes after PS5 and cost wise is not going to, because it sounds like the Steam box is going to be priced above the PS5, but it doesn't mean that Steam wouldn't eventually, you've got a tier of ways to play it on a PC or just Steam OS already. Steam Deck and eventually the box. There's nothing to say that they won't release some other kind of like S tier, like the Xbox Series S has done, where it's like it's a little less powerful, but it's enough to kind of be like a low end or kind of maybe mid tier PC to kind of play this stuff. And if you got lower tools for any developers to get in there and make their stuff already, on top of maybe there is a successful AI tool that creators are like, I feel comfortable using that, and that's going to augment and make us better. This could be
game changing, truly. I mean, I think both of us have been engaged with media in this way in some way or other since we were kids, right? Like we were part of that first digital native generation, and I think for a lot of us, us growing up was also the journey of these devices as they evolved, right? And I can't really think of the last time, honestly, that I think we had a new device entry, and I know Gary will get into more of this, but a new device entry that truly represented a different idea, right? And I do think there is a niche, right? Because if you look on the market, and this is unfortunately also connected to the AI boom, because that's driven up costs for graphics cards and even now memory cards, memory sticks dramatically, right? It's X thousands of percent in some cases, which is absolute madness. But even a reasonably entry level gaming PC these days are maybe, if you're really lucky with deals, you're shopping on Black Friday, you're shopping with a lot of discounts or something like that, maybe in the mid upper hundreds, right? But in a lot of cases, if you want to build something mid grade or above, and you want to try and future proof, we're talking easily $1,500 to $3,000 maybe, right? And that's just not a tenable cost for a lot of folks these days, with inflation, with the difficulties in the economy. Like, that's just not realistic. And so for Steam to come along,
and people want their box to look good, so that's what's going to pull them to put more stuff
exactly
into it.
And so for Valve to come along and offer something that fits into a niche where there's a desire for better hardware, more powerful hardware, you're willing to spend a little bit more than consoles cost, but less than a gaming PC, even at that entry level would cost, then I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens when it actually drops. I think sometime early next year, right?
Exactly.
The taking pre-orders already. God, would that I could see those numbers. I'm so curious. So curious. Valve, if you're listening, let us know.
If you want us to test some stuff out, I know you've already had some creators testing stuff, but could let us do it.
Yep.
Well, folks, that's been kind of a quick sneak preview of the Game of the Year awards, or the Game Awards Game of the Year nominees, and I kind of give you our thoughts on who we think is the best out of the crop. But also just trying to be honest of ones we haven't been able to play yet.
Yep.
We're going to be online streaming the Game Awards next Thursday, or you'll be seeing this on Friday, but next Thursday on the 11th. So make sure to join us on there on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch, whichever you prefer to see the stream on. Or if you follow the Game Awards stream, just want to see us chatting and stuff like that, you got multiple options. We'll have the official Game Award branding and stuff on our stuff. I'm also, I know some people have some critiques of Jeff, and there's some valid industry critiques of Jeff as far as the awards, so that's fair. But as far as just accessibility for folks to jump on the awards show and stream it on their own without any like bickering over copyrights and stuff, to just let us stream it on our bravo.
I call it enlightened self-interest. It's good for them. It's good for you. Why not?
Yeah. Hey, but some people I just think get so protective.
They do. They do. I don't super blame them.
What the benefit of it.
But it makes lives harder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But we're excited, and like we said, let us know what you think. Let us know what you think of the nominees. Is there someone that we missed that you think should have been talked about more? Is there someone that's not on the nominee list that you think should be talked about and that wasn't seen by the Game Awards? Definitely throw that into the comments. And also, if you're on the Nerd Union Discord, you can also jump in there and let us know as well. We'll kind of be in and out throughout the week leading up to the Game Awards. So hopefully one of us or the mods, Taryn, will see it and kind of let us know. We'll kind of jump in and chat when we can. All right. Thank you all.
Peace.